3.3 major project, Project 5, presentation and feedback. In Project 5, I've still continued with the theme armour. I've taken my research more in depth. I'm still looking at the couture houses and the ateliers, but I've been particularly absorbed by the detail and the refinement. What I'd started to consider in my own work, due to the financial aspect of purchasing fancy yarns, I've been able to generate a collection of samples with smaller collection of creative yarns, so all the samples are on the smaller scale. In Project 4 I was operating large scale samples, and this kind of worked with a contemporary playful aspect with some colour from the creative playground. I think at the moment I've got a combination of some playful ideas filtering through and some more mature pieces coming through, which I think this has been due to the media and the mixed media that I've been using, particularly with the creative yarns. Now, still continuing with armour and following documentaries on couture houses, I wanted to make some of my pieces a little bit more refined and, I suppose, bespoke. So I started to consider what could I do with my materials to enhance this refinement of finishing off. I'm continuing the research and I'm going to do a mini project on finishing edges with some quirky ideas of mixed media, how to fasten edges together, how edges could run around a garment and so forth. But in particular, one piece that I wanted to complete as a final piece is this large scale piece here. Now, this is developed by looking at chainmail and armour and still treating the theme that creativity is my armour. So I just wanted to kind of pull all this work together with the large scale fine piece, but still with the intention of something that was slightly simple, but in actual fact, through the research and then the making process, I've actually been able to achieve and find out how something can be a little bit more complicated than the actual idea in relationship is. I suppose what I'm trying to say is when something's written down on paper, to follow this through, the development and the refinement of it actually become complicated in its making process. And I suppose it's that from paper to final piece. So, continuing with the idea of the interrogation boards, I based everything around the creative yarn samples that I've knitted together and focused on the one particular piece by where I'd taken knitted cotton yarn and coated this layer by layer with a multi-purpose acrylic grey paint. Now, this works particularly very well because it bonds the knitted stitches together, so this will enable me to cut the pieces into segments or squares or circles or whatever the shape could be. So I have a couple of samples here from some large scale pieces that I've cut. Now, the colour palette has become metallic silver, the deep grey, so all of that works very well, but I just wanted to just tweak some of the pieces, and I purchased some silver leaf. Now, to achieve this, for this to adhere to the piece, I PVA'd over the surface and then delicately placed the silver leaf. As to whether it is successful, I'm not too sure, because the silver leaf, for some bizarre reason, just disintegrates into thin air as to whether the structure of the knit is too coarse for the refinement of the material, but it doesn't give the coverage that I was hoping for. But it kind of does work when all the pieces were individually put together as a large scale piece. The pieces were cut into squares. Some research into Alexander McQueen's armour pieces for a couture show. Just a simple square. And then I've joined the pieces with these very small rings to the four corners, and then joined all the pieces. Not all the squares are perfect, so there is an element of disjointed to the construction of this, but the piece does move. In fact, this piece, even though the material started off quite raw, quite robust and durable with the paint, the final piece has actually become quite delicate. I don't think that this particular piece will sustain any of the performance durability that I have made previously in Project 4 and the large scale final pieces for Project 5, and straight away I feel this piece needs to be wrapped in tissue and stored in a box. So it's kind of pieced together all of the process from the design idea through to the making, through to the storage, and through to the aesthetic visual piece of wearable art, I would call this. I'm a little bit kind of at the moment taking more TLC with the piece, as you can see. It does move in its own way. I left the perimeter or the edges raw with the offcuts. This is how the tension of the cotton knitting has taken to the knitting machine. This was actually, when it was wet, was pegged to the line, so these distorted shapes have become quite nice for the distorted images. Each piece is quite individual. There is no flow to the direction of the knitted, whether they be horizontal or vertical. I think at this stage I will hold back as to where and photograph this piece. I think that this will come together towards the end when I'm deciding on conclusive ideas, and it will be nice to put some illustration along with this, and then attach a little bit of research and a few of the samples.